And for me, that makes the story even more remarkable. In Cambridge, just dropped my Alto in for an emergency repair. Fell off the stand the other week, wrecked the eyes and mouthpiece that I just had repaired. So whilst it's in the shop, I'm going to go grab a coffee, get some work done on the iPad Pro, and then head back there in about an hour's time. So hopefully not too severe. I mean, it still blows okay, it's just got a leak. And I can't figure out where the leak is or repair it, so hence why I'm calling in the professionals. That's great, thank you very much. So this is my review of the John Coltrane film Chasing Trane. I was able to watch it yesterday for the first time on PBS, on the live stream there. I'd heard about it, that's in the clips, you know, the clips that have been floating around the internet for a while. I was keen to watch it, but I was a little skeptical. The reason why is I have read pretty much every published article about Coltrane. There's the Ashley Kahn book upstairs as well. I've watched a hell of a lot of DVDs about Coltrane. I've listened to a lot of Coltrane. I've studied a lot of Coltrane. He is probably the most important musical influence. He's this amazing figure in jazz, but I've mentioned it in another vlog. When I visited New York in 2005, I mentioned it in this vlog, you can watch it more here. I had the privilege of having a beer with Ravi, really randomly, find out more in that other vlog. And I'd kind of gone over there, having read this book, and Coltrane was kind of like this god figure, this mythical figure, because that's the way the media like to sensationalize certain people within genres. It's the way they can kind of focus, and I get it. Coltrane is an incredibly important figure, and I'm not dissing him down here. You know, he is incredible, one of the most influential musicians of the 20th century. But there is very much this media hype around him, and I've kind of grown a tough skin to it the more you study a person. But what struck home to me when I'm sat there having a beer with Ravi Coltrane in Smalls in New York is John Coltrane was Ravi Coltrane's father. And that might sound, well, yeah, but this is the key thing. He was just a man. And for me, that makes the story even more remarkable. He's not this mythical, godlike creature that none of us can kind of relate to. I think it's a Benny Golson quote from this DVD, I'm not quite sure, where he says, you know, the thing about Coltrane was he practiced like a man who had no talent, and yet he had all the talent in the world. Now, the thing about Coltrane is he's got a great story. And great stories always work well in the media. Media love great stories. So with Coltrane, you've got the recording in Hawaii when he's kind of just starting out and he's not very good. I mean, listen to this clip by Wynton.
And just that he could go from that way of playing to what he became. Man, that's all you need to know about him.
So we've got the setup to the story, then we've got the tension, the kind of the drugs, the habit. Will he come back from it? And then he just rises and rises. He gets back into Miles's band. He tours Europe. He leaves Miles. Well, first of all, he records Kind of Blue, the greatest jazz album of all time. He then also records his own Giant Steps. I'm not mentioning more about Giant Steps, given the trouble I get in on here when I mention Giant Steps. And he continues this upward trajectory, which leads to kind of a Love Supreme, one of the greatest pieces of work ever produced in music. For me, it ranks alongside kind of Wagner's Ring Cycle, works by Beethoven, Mozart, Bach. It's that good. Okay, it's on this upward rise. And then he kind of goes into Ascension and goes into the avant-garde stuff and loses people, but he's still this jazz star. For jazz, he is a superstar. You know, he is a household name. you know, for serious music fans, well, maybe not beyond serious music fans, it's one of those brands, as it were. This story, this narrative keeps going, and then he has this untimely death, you know, in 1967, at kind of the peak of his powers. He's really, you know, on this kind of mega trajectory, and so it makes a great narrative. So I'm not surprised that this film has been made. I would say Coltrane's story is better than Miles's story, for, you know, for the Don Cheadle kind of fans out here. But it's a really interesting documentary. I'm so thrilled they've got Sonny Rollins in there, even though he's wearing his Santa Claus outfit. That's a joke, a very English joke. Don't get offended at me. I love Sonny Rollins to bits. It's so great that we've still got people like Sonny Rollins and Jimmy Heath and Benny Golson around to talk about those experiences.
Why, the supreme whatever, to be able to play like Miles played and like Coltrane played.
Now, I'll admit, at the start, I was a bit disappointed because it felt kind of like every other Coltrane documentary that's come out, especially kind of the Ken Burns effects even coming through. It was just like the Ken Burns jazz series. In fact, the same voices were there. You know, it was Wynton and Ashley Carr and Lewis Porter. So it was a bit kind of like, oh, you know, tell me something new. But then some gems, some absolute gems in this story. Coltrane's visit to Nagasaki, I never knew about that. I knew about the trip to Japan in '66. It was kind of one of his last foreign tours, but the kind of the visit to Nagasaki, that kind of that deep desire to really get on this peaceful mission. There's a great desire, I think, to add more to the Coltrane story than's there. There's this thing of making him a spiritual leader and all this thing, you know, there's the Church of John Coltrane. There's very much that kind of 60s culture that pervades from Coltrane's life. I don't think he ever set out to be a theologian. I really don't, and I wrote my paper on that, and I'll bore you with it another time in another vlog. But he wanted to go deeper into the meaning. He wanted to ask those questions a little bit in the film about, you know, this kind of circle of fist that Alice found with all these geometric triangles within inside of it. You know, he read up on Einstein. He was very much a very deep thinker. But one thing they kind of gloss over a little bit, it's in the introduction, but it's the thing that I was talking about to Branford Marsalis about in relation to Coleman Hawkins. And Branford was talking about how Hawkins didn't grow up in the South. He doesn't have that kind of blues, that Pentecostal church kind of thing. Now, Coltrane was brought Methodist, but it's still within the Black Church of the South, and Coltrane is a phenomenal blues player, and they don't really, for me, mention enough of that. There's a real great line of the blues through Coltrane's music. Even in the avant-garde stuff, the blues is still in there. Coltrane's story as well, you know, going back onto the narrative a bit, there's some real sadness there. You know, the loss of both his grandfathers, his father and his uncle, all around the age of 12, 13, must have had a tremendous effect on him. By the way, it's great to see Bill on there. Have you seen Bill play the blues here, by the way? He's not a bad saxophone player. The soundtrack is awesome. This guy, is it Cornel West? Very, very clever guy. Some really interesting observations. You know, he really comes out with some great stuff.
So what do? You steal away at night. Near the creek. Hold hands in a ring, shout, and lift your voice. Lift your voice, vocals, create community, camaraderie, and so forth.
One quote that's missing, the interview McCoy Tyner in it, and there's a great, it's in the Ken Burns documentary from Branford, where Branford tells the story of students talking to Elvin Jones at some point and said, you know, how did you play with such intensity? You know, how did you and Coltrane be, you know, able to produce music of that level? To which Elvin Jones apparently replies, well, you got to prepare to die when the people don't know this word spiritual for Coltrane, and that I think that it's overused and misunderstood a lot of the time. One thing is definite from Coltrane's music is his element of sacrifice. You know, the whole band were willing to sacrifice what they were doing in order to achieve this higher goal. It really speaks of this mission in life to be able to, as Coltrane put it, to be able to show the listener something about the way they perceive the world. And within that, you get the clip on Alabama, which we learn, and I'd kind of heard stories about this, but these guys are pretty confident that it's true, that Coltrane said that he composed Alabama and improvised along to the speech by Dr. King that Dr. King gave at the funeral of the 4 girls who were killed by that church bomb in Birmingham, Alabama. And I think that's one of the greatest tracks ever. It's so it's like a requiem. It's just really, it's special. And I think, is it, again, Colin West, the philosopher, sort of says this thing, this element of the blues bringing about healing, about what Dr. King says in his speech on jazz, about taking the harshest realities of life, but bringing out some kind of hope, some kind of healing, some kind of realization through music that things will get better. For me, the gem of this whole documentary is the home video footage, which must have come by Ravi, I presume, from the family. It really brings Coltrane to life. People of my generation, I'm 36, the 1960s seem a long time ago. They weren't, you know, they're kind of 15 years before we were born. That scares me with my own children now, how they may think of the 90s or things like that. But the 60s and the 1920s seem like ancient history, but of course it wasn't. You know, it's within living memory. My grandfather was 3 years older than Coltrane. I knew my grandpa well. In fact, today it'll be 6 years since he passed away. And, you know, that's only 6 years ago, and he was older than Coltrane. And so there becomes this whole myth of Trane. And yet, he was a man, and he worked really hard and opened up his music and opened up a musical world to others and tried to speak and live a life that influenced and inspired other people. And I think this film shows those lofty goals. I think this film shows the human side of Coltrane, and I hope it inspires all of us, whether musicians or not, to work for higher goals, to work for a higher purpose. Please, if you're watching for the first time, you know, really appreciate a like, and also really appreciate a subscribe. This is a vlog, so there's kind of footage in and out behind it. It's a sort of snapshot of what I've been doing, as well as a review of this Coltrane film. There's loads of other stuff to come. Make sure you check out what I did. Oh, where's this going to go? Yeah, yesterday, I think, and then this time last year it's here. Q&A vlog coming up a little later this week, so either stick your comments in below or hit me up on Twitter. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Bye!